So I'm carrying on with a series called Reasonable Faith. I'm quite excited for this. As I'm preparing it in the week, and as I often do, when I prepare, I learn more myself than what I think you learn. And that's just the nature of things. When you have to teach something or present it, you seem to learn more than the person receiving it. But really, the idea of reasonable faith is the idea that we have to have an answer for our faith. The Word tells us that we need to be prepared to have an answer for our faith, that we might be able to defend it if anyone is asking for it. And so the idea behind having this series of reasonable faith is that our faith in God doesn't have to be something that's unreasonable. That when someone asks us, well, why do you believe, that we actually have a reason? And that you and I should, and we are called to engage our mind in our faith as much as we are called to engage our heart in our faith. That our mind and our faith doesn't have to be something that's separate. That we can look at our faith and actually have a reason for it, and not just because the Bible says so. Right? And so a lot of times we come into faith and we believe because God places the spirit of faith in us, and He starts to regenerate our spirit. And so we do have a sense of believing what He says by pure faith. But the Bible also tells us that we ought to have a reason for our faith. We ought to have a reason as to why believe the things that we believe. And so the series is really centered around giving some logical and practical reasons for our faith. So really when we look at it, it's really the study of apologetics. And what's apologetics? It's the branch of Christian theology that aims to provide rational and reasonable justifications for faith and address objectives or doubts. Right? So we want to give reasonable reasons to provide rational, reasonable justifications, right? For why do we believe the things, and kind of address some of the objections or doubts. So last week we spoke about the case for Christ. Why do we believe that Christ is the reason for our faith? Because the Word tells us that the Bible tells us that without the resurrection, that our faith is dead. That without the resurrection, our faith is dead. So there's no reason for our faith if there's no resurrection. So this morning, I would really want to look at the question of, is God real? Is God real? Is God real? We say yes. Why? He's real because I said so. Right? Is God real because we have a Bible that says He's real, right? But really, here's the question. This is the idea behind our faith. Is God real? And every one of us most probably will say, yeah, absolutely He's real. Wow, well, because I feel that He's real. Or, I believe that He's real. But we have to have some sort of reasons for it, because you can't use the thing, you can't necessarily use the concept of faith to someone that asks you that doesn't believe. Right? So really apologetics is the defense of our faith and giving some reasons and reasonable justifications for it. So Psalm 19:1, of course, we have to start with a verse because that will make the most sense. The heavens proclaim the glory of God. The skies display His craftsmanship. The heavens proclaim the glory of God. The skies display His craftsmanship. Romans 1:20 says, for ever since the world was created, people have seen the earth and the sky. Through everything God made, they can clearly see His invisible qualities, His eternal power and divine nature, so they have no excuse for not knowing God. Okay? To put it very plainly, everything we see around us is speaking to the invisible qualities of God. And if you look around yourself, you have to, when you start examining nature, if we start making some questions around how things work and how things are structured, when we see those things, the Bible actually tells us that we should have no excuse for not knowing Him. And this is what I found very interesting, most people that actually people that are seekers of truth, will come to the end of it and find that God is real, Christ is real, and the faith and the resurrection is real. Most people that are actual seekers of truth will come to that conclusion. The people that have an issue with God and an issue with resurrection are people that are actually not seeking truth. They want to have a point of view and they want to disprove it without really looking at it rationally. So belief in God and disbelief in God is still a faith. You need to understand it. Because sometimes we think belief in God is faith alone, but having to disbelieve God is actually faith as well. Because you believe in something, you have a faith in something that actually probably also isn't reasonable. Okay? So if we look at Scripture itself, tells us that ever since the world was created, people have seen the earth in the sky. It's interesting that why it would say that. It says, look, if you have to look around you, ever since it was created, people have seen the earth and the sky. And through everything God made, they can clearly see His invisible qualities. You don't have to go very far to see God. You don't have to look very hard to see Him. The only problem is you actually have to look. But most people don't want to look. They want to assume things because why? They like to keep the status quo. They like to keep what they believe to be true, because every time we have to question things we believe, it's uncomfortable. Because we don't like to be wrong, and we don't like to have to question those things that we believe, because we might have to change how we function. Are you with me this morning? When we have to examine things we believe, and even with our own belief, within our faith, there are certain things that we believed for so many years, then when we start to look at it, we might not actually be accurate. The problem with that is that we're going to have to then go back and start to question some of the things that we believe, which will require us to realign ourselves. So I believe that we need to be seekers of truth. And we need to be looking and examining and searching for the truth. So let's make a case for God this morning. So when we look at the question, is God real? There's a couple of arguments we can make, right? So there's a few of them, and I really want to encourage you, if you didn't scan the QR code, there's a bunch of additional resources. I'm not going to go very, very deep into it. I'm going to give you the highlight of it. I want you to go and really go into it. And there's a bunch of links in the sermon notes that you can obviously go research a little bit more yourself. And I really want to encourage you to do that, because what you're going to find is it's actually going to build up your faith. It's going to build up your faith, because it's not just, oh, I feel God is real. No, there's actually evidence for it. So there's the two main things we can look at for the case of God. There's two arguments that we can look at. Number one is the moral law argument, and number two is the cosmological argument. The moral law argument. So the moral law argument basically means that objective morals exist. Number one. What does that mean? Is that there's morals. We understand what morals is, right and wrong. Number two, that it's actually objective. That's the main thing. A lot of times what you'll come up with in terms of an objection to the moral law argument is that morals are subjective. What that means is right and wrong is based on culture and context, not the fact that there's actually an absolute between right and wrong. Okay? So you find that people say, but no, morality is subject to an environment, a culture, and a context, and you'll have different cultures have different moral standards. That's actually incorrect, because every single one of us knows that murder is wrong. We don't have to be told. And if morality is subjective, then we can justify gross abuses. So if morality is subjective, we can say that Hitler's extermination of Jews was okay, because according to him, it's a subjective morality. And when you bring that up, most people say, but no, of course, that's wrong. Why is it wrong? Because you shouldn't hurt someone. Well, who says that? Because there has to be a standard according to which we will live. And everyone naturally will say, well, actually, it's bad to hurt someone. You cannot say, well, no, it's bad, but why? If we don't have an objective morality, then we can have standards for different things, and every single one of us can then justify for ourselves any action we choose to have with basically saying, well, it's my subjective morality. Okay? This is why I said that there is no such thing as my truth. There's no such thing, well, this is my truth. No, that is your perspective. And that is your opinion. And I love that saying, you're entitled to your opinion, you're not entitled to your own facts. You can have an opinion and a perspective of something. The problem is it can be wrong. And so we must understand that objective morality does exist. Every single one of us has an inert ability to understand there is a right and a wrong. There is something that is right and there is something that is wrong. Okay? So it means it's objective. And if it's objective, then it has to have a source. If you have objective morality, someone must give that morality. If you have a law, there must be a lawgiver. Nothing happens by itself. So there is a source. So everything has a source, right? So if we have morality, we must have a source of the morality. Morals do not just happen. Oh, but my parents taught me. Okay, but who taught them? Their parents. And then who taught them? Their parents. So where did it come from? No, the Bible. Is it that the Bible gave us morality, or is it that the Bible confirmed something we already knew? Think about what I'm saying. We must have a source. The Bible confirmed what was already there. Most people say, but the Ten Commandments, it was a culture thing, so we get a morality from those Ten Commandments. Thank you. Right? But isn't that just God confirming what we already knew? That there is a right and a wrong. There is something that you are supposed to do and something that you're not supposed to do. And if that moral objective morality exists, then there must be a lawgiver. So who is the lawgiver? Well, that's what you and I have to decide. That means there must be a higher being. Now, you and I believe the God of the Bible. Okay? That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the standard for believing that there is an entity outside of ourselves. There is an entity that is bigger than us, that is smarter than us, that transcends time. Okay? And we know that as the God of the Bible. Okay? You with me this morning? Okay. Cosmological argument. And this is basically looking at the universe. And because the universe exists, there must be a cause for its existence. Okay. If it exists, which it does, there should be a cause for it. Now, I wanted to give you an example here. And you'll understand as I go along. So everything that we see must have a cause. Everything that we experience must have a cause. So I want you to think of it this way. There is a bottle of water or a glass of water here. If you came into the church this morning and the glass of water was standing here by itself, what would your assumption be? So important, right? That's kind of logical, right? I mean, you would think to yourself, you came in here, someone came, put a table, put a glass, put some water in there and left it there. Okay? You would assume that there was a cause for it, and you would assume that something happened before you saw it. You wouldn't assume coming into it and say, oh, it just happened. And especially, you probably wouldn't say, it just happened by itself. Right? Okay. So there's a couple of things I want to run through here. So number one, so if the universe exists, and if something exists, a glass of water, it must mean that there must be a source for this glass of water. It just doesn't appear by itself. So when you look at this cosmological argument, there's four things. So number one, it's the idea of causation, which means every event or state of being must have a cause. For the glass to end up on the table, it must have originated from something. Something must have happened for it to appear here. It didn't appear by itself. Okay. So number one, causation. Number two, contingency. This means that the universe and everything within it is dependent on something else. The water in the glass is dependent on the glass. The glass is dependent on the table. The table is dependent on the floor. The glass and the water being here is dependent of someone actually having poured it and putting it on there. It's dependent. If I remove the source, if I remove what's holding the water, then I don't have the event. You with me this morning? Okay. So everything is dependent on this scenario happening. Okay. So causation, it needed to have a source. It's contingent, depend on something. Number 3, it must have a necessary being, right? The existence of this contingent state. So this is a contingent state. It means this whole thing is dependent on something else. If it's depending on something else, it must have a necessary being. It must have something that's controlling it. Water is not controlled by itself in the glass. The glass being put on the table is not controlled by itself. There must be something, a necessary being. It requires a necessary being, one that exists independently, is not caused by anything else. So we must have a necessary being, right? So it means there must be a being independent of what is happening here. Okay? This cannot be happening by itself. Are you with me this morning? All right, so it must be a necessary being. And lastly, you must have a first cause, right? So the necessary being is the ultimate first cause. Are you tracking with me this morning? It's a bit of a parallel, right? So I have a state of being. I have something that is structured. I have something that is in place. I have something that's sitting here that cannot be by itself. I must have a first cause. Everything is dependent on something else. For it to be dependent on something, you must have something that is independent of it to cause it to be in that place. And then you must have a first cause, which means someone must have decided before you came into the church to put a glass of water. This morning when you walked in, you saw screens, you saw a piano, you saw chairs. Every single one of us assumed that someone came here and put that thing together. Nobody got here and said, oh wow, it just appeared. No, someone independent of the state needed to have come in early and set it up, and it must have been someone that initiated it. People now scared to say anything. First cause, right? So there must be one that initiated the entire chain of causation. Okay. So, what does that mean in our context? So, you and I appear here. There must be a causation. There must be someone that's causing this thing to happen. But that thing must be, and we are dependent on something else. That thing must be independent of us, and he must have initiated this thing to happen. With me. So when you talk about this idea of cosmological argument, it is the idea that there is a being that's outside of ourselves. Must be independent of what is happening. There must have been a first cause. Okay. There must have been an intentionality to create what we see around us. Okay. So that really points to the idea of intelligent design. Intelligent design. If you design something, you come and design a table, right? So someone decided they're going to make this table. There's an intelligence behind designing it. And if it's something that's been designed, it means that there is something that must have designed it. But it's not random. It has a structure and it's able to stand on its own. You can look at it and say, oh, there is a design behind this. And you can look at it and say, if there is a design behind it that holds it, there must be a designer. Okay? And it's not a random design. It's an intelligent design. Okay? So if you're like a little bit geeky, this will be cool to you. If you're not, well, you're just going to have to sit through it because I like it. All right? So one of the things is, and this was interesting for me because I always thought, and let me just give you a caveat here. None of us know exactly what happened. That's the point. Right? All we know is that if we use logic, we can come to a conclusion to say something did happen. And there was a start to everything happening. So I'm not going to get into how old we are, what is the length of the earth. Honestly, I don't know. I have no idea. It doesn't actually change the fact that there's intelligent design and that all of these things are still necessary for everything to be in place. Right? So whether it was whether it's 1 billion years, 6,000 years, doesn't change the fact because I don't know. The only thing I do know is what has been actually been discovered. So you've got the Big Bang. And weird enough, I always thought the Big Bang was contrary to the Bible, God, or whatever. But funny enough, not. Because what it actually does, it supports the idea that there is a starting point. So mathematicians have actually discovered that there was a starting point to the universe. It's not infinite. Hasn't been around forever. It has a starting point. And one of those starting points is coming back to the Big Bang, where everything kind of exploded. And it kind of makes sense. Now, whether God used that method to create life, regardless, it's irrelevant of the fact that there was a starting point. And if there was a starting point, someone needed to have started it. And it didn't start from nothing. There was a starting point to life and existence as we know it. And so if there was a starting point, there needs to be someone that is independent of that starting point. Okay. So we've got the Big Bang, and what it actually comes down to is, if we look at it, is that there's a lot of things that are in the universe that are finely tuned for our existence. Okay, I don't know if you've ever thought about it, but you know what the weird thing is? It's a couple of things, and again, if you want to go into it, I really encourage you, make sure you go through those links. Gravity. Do you know that if gravity, now there's a very big number there, it's 10 to the power of 60. Do you know what that is? That's 60 zeros behind 10. That's a really long number. Okay. Now you take 1 in 10 to the 60. So that's a 0,0 with 60 zeros and then a 1. That's the percentage. Okay? It's a pretty minute number. If you had to change gravity by that really, really small number, life as we know it would not exist. Gravity would either cave in on itself, or would move so slowly that it would have not allowed enough time for life to form. Okay? Very big thing. Okay. Then number 2, we have this thing called dark matter. It actually makes up 95% of the universe. It's this background noise that nobody knows what it is. Dark matter. It's stuff that's working in the background. Nobody understands this, but 95% of the universe is that. It's called intelligent design. And then lastly, the Higgs boson principle, which is actually, they call it the God particle, because they have no idea what it is. It's the particle that gives things mass. They're like, so everything has mass, but what gives it mass? Well, we don't know, so we're just going to call it the God particle. Because something that we don't understand is giving life and giving mass. And by the way, if there's no mass, there's no life. You and I do not exist. And so our universe is finely tuned to give life as we know it. Any changes, slight changes, minute changes to it, if the tilt, the axis of the earth, the tilt was off by a minute percentage, it would be devastating to us, because there would be no life. The environment that we live would not have, wouldn't be conducive to us living. So the universe is finely tuned to produce life. Now, if it's so finely tuned, it means that there's a plan behind it. And if there's an intelligence behind it, it means there's an intelligent designer behind it. I don't know how, the idea that, and so this is the contrary to this, is that the Big Bang happened, and eventually things just gave enough time for things to collide and for things to happen, then eventually life was produced. The problem is, mathematicians even themselves agree that that has no basis in any kind of logical idea. There's just not enough time to do that. Even if the earth was, or the universe was infinitely, billions of years, there's not enough time to produce life as we know it. So it means there is an intelligent design behind everything we see. Number 2, or the second thing, is DNA. DNA. If you actually look at DNA and study a little bit about it, you'll see how extraordinary He actually is. You know what Bill Gates said about DNA? He said, this is an actual tweet. He said, DNA is more advanced than any software ever created. You know who Bill Gates is? Okay. He's a pretty smart guy, I think. Right? It's more advanced than he himself is a programmer. Right? Created Windows, right? So he himself says it's more advanced, more sophisticated than any software ever created. Now, if I look at a piece of software and I say, geez, this is it's pretty hectic what this piece of software does. And a lot of stuff with AI, if you look at AI, it's amazing, right? There's a lot of cool things that is happening there. You'd look at it and you're like, that's pretty complex, right? How many of you know how your Windows works? No, you just know you press the button. And if it doesn't work, restart the computer. Right? That's the standard. None of us understand the intricacy behind it. You just know it's pretty complicated, right? Now, the more complicated it is, the more design has to be. And the more complicated a software program is, you probably think the more intelligent the person that wrote it is. Correct? Yeah? Now, if we have a smart guy saying, hey, DNA is more sophisticated than software itself, you say, well, it probably means that there was some sort of intelligence behind it. DNA is an amazing thing. Right? DNA is actually a single cell. But if you had to unwind a single cell, it would be 2 meters long. Okay? So DNA is a single cell that lives within your body. If you had to unwind it, it would be 2 meters long. If you had to unwind all of the DNA in your body, it would be 6.2 billion kilometers. Okay? That is twice around the solar system. That's in one body. Not all the people in the earth. That's just your body. The DNA in your body will go around the whole solar system. If you don't know what the solar system is, it's all the planets and the sun. It's quite far. Go twice around the solar system. And this is the most amazing thing. It actually has the code for life. DNA is the coding mechanism to produce everything that we see. Everything in your body. It's got dynamos. It's got factories in your body. It produces proteins and aminos. And everything that's needed for your body, for you to live, is coded like a computer program within the DNA. It actually has a 4-letter alphabet. There's a 4-letter alphabet within DNA that codes everything within your body. I don't know about you, but I'm like, if I saw that, I'd probably think that somebody pretty smart designed that thing. You know, you can do DNA testing. You can test DNA, you can go for DNA testing, and they can tell you, these are the things that you're susceptible to. And oh, by the way, you know, these foods you really shouldn't touch because they're not good for you. It's coded within you, right? And so God, and this is my conclusion, God coded life within us. Intelligent design. Intelligent design. I cannot look at it and say, oh, that just give it enough time. There's water, there's a table, and there's a glass. Just give it enough time, and together they'll find each other eventually. Because that's in essence the argument for the non-existence of God, the non-existence of intelligent design, the non-existence of an intelligent hand guiding everything that we see. Now, how it happened, I have no idea. But I can tell you definitely this idea of the bionic soup. You know what the bionic soup is? It's basically, we just had a whole bunch of like mud, right? Just like soup of stuff happening. And out of that, creatures started to develop. And out of that, then they grew a head, and they grew an arm, and then they grew brains, and then they grew this intelligence that we have somehow by itself. Okay? And I said, I'm like, okay, we're all pretty smart people, right? Which one is more logical? A guiding hand that I don't really understand, don't know, but I can see and I can observe that someone would have put this thing there together. Or that somehow, somewhere, there was just like a mix of stuff happening, and a glass was created by itself. The water created itself. The table created itself. And all the things that are needed to create all of this stuff just happened to create itself somewhere along the line. And it produced a cup of water sitting on the table. That, or there was some guy that decided to get a glass, water, put a table together, design the table, put the thing together, and now you see the finished product. The fact that you see the finished product doesn't mean that it just happened by itself. It means that there was some sort of plan behind it. Okay. And so we look at these things and we say, okay, well, this is great. This means that there's some sort of guiding hand behind it. I'm going to close with this, guys. Because at the end of the day, the reality is, I can give you all of the facts and all of the amazing reasons as to why you should believe that God is real. And I can give you all the reasons, all these amazing things as to why you should accept that there is a greater reality than what you see. But at the end of the day, you and I still have to accept the fact that we are not our own, we are not independent. We have to receive that for ourselves. Because yes, we are called to use our minds to worship God, but at the end of the day, it's a spiritual thing that we have to accept. And these things what they can do is they can ask, if you don't believe, they can force you to ask some questions. They can, if you do believe, it will help you. If you don't believe, it will start to ask you some questions. If you do believe and say, look, I do believe there's a guiding hand. I'm just not sure which guiding hand it is. Then go and start researching that. But this is going to sound really, really mean. But I think it's lazy sometimes to have an answer for something. Not sometimes. It's always lazy to have an answer for something without actually having gone and looked for the answer. Because a lot of us have answers based on what somebody else told us, or what has been projected to us, and have never actually gone and said, well, hold on, this thing that you're telling me, is it actually real? And if it is real, what's the reason behind it? And if it's not real, well then, what's the reason why it's not real? And if it's a thing of, I believe there's something that exists, but who is that? Then go and start researching. And what you'll find is overwhelming evidence for the God of the Bible and Jesus are the one that we know. Because if there is a cause, then I'm sure we'll be able to find the reason for it. And most people reject God not because He's not real. They reject Him because He is real. And they just don't want to submit to Him. Because there's two different things. Sometimes we can come up with justifications as to, oh, but God is not real. No. Most people will say He's not real because they don't want to come to the conclusion that they are not the most important thing in the universe. That we are created, and we are created by design. And if we are created, I cannot tell the Creator what I'm supposed to do. The Creator tells me this is what you are designed for. The glass cannot tell me what the glass is supposed to do. I say the glass is designed to hold water. Now the glass can decide for itself, oh, I'm actually designed to be for someone to sit on me. I guess you can. But it's definitely not going to be the fulfillment of what it's actually been designed for. The glass will function at the lowest level of where it's supposed to be. So the Creator tells the creation, this is what you're meant to do. And once the creation starts to flow in what the Creator has decided it needs to do, guess what? There's the full fulfillment of what the thing was created for. And a glass doing what a glass is supposed to do brings nourishment and blessing to the environment around it. So you and I are created for a reason. We are created, but we are created for a purpose. That purpose is found in Him. It's not found in ourselves. And with the moment we start searching for what my purpose is, I need to go to God to tell me, God, what am I created for? What am I supposed to do? Because I do not want to be someone that's functioning outside of what I'm created to be. Because I want to be in the fullest expression of what you created me to be. And Scripture tells us, Colossians 1:16 says, for through Him God created everything in heavenly realms and on earth. He made the things we can see and the things we cannot see. Kind of blinds up what we just spoke about. Just as thrones, kingdoms, rulers, authorities in the unseen world. Everything was created through Him and for Him. The Creator creates things for Himself. But here's the thing. Our Creator has a motivation. And that motivation is love. He wants to have a relationship with you and me. And it's not a relationship of control or subjection or putting you down. It's a relationship of, I'm going to tell you who you are. And I'm going to tell you what you need to do. And when you flow, and when you come under what I'm telling you to do, you're going to find your best life and you experience the most fulfillment that you've ever experienced. Outside of me, you cannot do anything. And Hebrews 11:6 says, and it is impossible to please God without faith. Anyone who wants to come to Him must believe that God exists and that He rewards those who diligently or sincerely seek Him. You cannot please God without faith. I can give you all the justifications as to why your faith should be in God, but you still have to have faith. You say, you can't please God with only logic. You got to please Him with faith. You have to take a step of, hey, you know what? I don't really know, but this makes sense. And so I'm going to flow into that. And the more I flow into it, the more I realize God is real and Jesus is real. And Jesus brings me into a relationship with Him. So I got to know that I got to please Him with faith. And then I have to believe that He exists. And this is the most important one. I have to believe that He rewards those who seek Him. And He does. Every time you look for God, you're going to find Him. Even if you're looking for false ones, you're going to find the real one. There are some amazing testimonies and some amazing books. I won't go into it. There were people, different religions, sought their God, but found Jesus. Because truth is truth. There's a book called Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus. It's a book of a devout Muslim who encountered a college roommate that was a Christian. But this guy was devout. And it tells his story of how he was seeking Allah but ended up finding Jesus. Because all truth it's not subjective, it's absolute. And the absolute truth is that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And the only way we can come to God is through Him. And so I want to encourage you to be seekers of truth. I want to encourage you to don't just say, oh yeah, I heard a sermon and Pastor Bo, gave us some cool stuff. Go and just spend a little bit of time. If this has piqued your interest, say, you know what, I actually want to hear a little bit more about this. Go to those links and see, hey, there's so much truth in this. And when you come to the conclusion that God is real and there's not some mystic weird force out there, you're going to be confronted with the reality that God is real, God is the Creator. It's probably a good idea that I follow Him.